So also these variable names should not use any system variable names. This is X, Y are all accepted. But suppose if you're calling a system variable, suppose this set Q and all those things is already a system function that you cannot obviously assign as a variable's name, because what you're doing is it's making the AutoLISP interpreter to get confused. So which is what? So by that, by normal definition, you cannot assign any variable names that are already associated with system variable name. Finally, if any variable is not assigned to any specific value, be it a text or a numerical value, then it will always be linked as a nil variable. That is, it do not bear any value into it. So this is how variable names are treated in the Lisp environment. So let us put it all together, whatever we have seen so far. So what we've seen is for every open parenthesis, there always must be an associated parenthesis, close parenthesis. So that will make AutoLISP interpreter to understand that it has to process something within those parentheses. So that is how the Lisp environment is carried out. And second is, for always any open quotes, double quotes, that should be always a double quote. So it means that always the functions that you're using, that the double quotes and the parentheses should be associated with it, because AutoLISP keeps on looking into this. Whenever it got us an open parenthesis and open quotes, it always looks for the next part where it gets closed, and then it process the content that is present within those things. So typically what it means that when there are multiple open and closed braces, what we'll do is we'll try to find the innermost content of that open and close parenthesis, that is innermost list function, and then it will try to execute it from inside to the outside. So the codes will be executed one by one from the internal layer to the outer layer within your single AutoLISP command. So what means that you are putting out sequence of commands within itself, that is, you're nesting those functions into a single function. But AutoLISP takes care of the nesting by understanding that it will decode that, putting away function by function from the internal side to the external. Let us look by an example. So here you can see that we have two sets of functions. So here functions operation, one is a multiplication, the other is a subtraction. And again we have two sets of open and close parentheses. So now AutoCAD, AutoLISP environment understands that this is the internal function, that because for this open, it will associate this open, the outermost closed is associated to the outermost open. So this is an outer function. Whereas for this open and close, AutoLISP understand that this is an internal function. So it will try to execute this first and then move on to others. So what happens is, in a human readable format, we can decode this saying that 5 minus 3, and this output is multiplied by 3 as in this. So this is how AutoLISP will understand, interpret the commands that we are executing. And finally, as we put earlier, for all the coding environment, as comments is an integral part of it, AutoLISP understands that whatever is followed by double semicolon are treated as commands. That is, they will not be interpreted at all. It will be left as it is. So this commands is a very important and a powerful part of your programming language to make yourself to understand what it is, because you executed this code for a specific reason. But later point of time, that is say 6 months, 1 year later, and suppose you have moved to a different function altogether, you're no longer working on that project. But when you're looking back, sometimes we ourselves might not be able to recollect what was the purpose of the code that was put into, what was the output that is expected, what are the inputs that are expected, and what is the function that is expected to do. So comments or kind of tags or nodes that are attached within the coding language to give it a more readable and more interpretable form to the human mind. So always use comments within your coding language, however be simple it is, to make sure that it will help you and all the users of this code so that it can be modular in approach and can be easily used upon. Because if your code is very wonderful, but if none of the people can make sense of it, then it can go in the gutter. That is, it may not be used as it is intended to use. So now we'll quickly look into how AutoCAD treats this commands that we have. A short example of it. So as we seen, anything with an open and close parenthesis is treated as a list. That is, AutoCAD interprets that as a sequence of code that needs to be executed. So we'll quickly type in it. So now we are giving a open parenthesis here in the command prompt, command line, stating that I'm going to execute a list. So suppose let us consider that you're going to perform a multiplication operation upon the operands, that is 2 space 5, and then close the parenthesis, click on enter. You can see that AutoLISP executes that as 2 times 5 is 10. So this is how you are executing this command in the command line of AutoCAD. So likewise, suppose if we go for the variable set q x as 1, now you can see that x has been assigned to the value 1, that is what is listed here. However, if you go on and call x, you can see that it will always try to invoke the system variable that is already assigned to it. So always do remember that whatever has to be executed has to come within the parenthesis only, and in this command line it will show that it is executed immediately in this way. So instead, if we want to call the command that we already executed in a Lisp environment, then we have to precede that with an exclamatory mark here. So exclamatory mark followed by the variable that we have assigned is x. Clicking on enter will return the Lisp variable of that. So this is the application of the exclamatory mark to execute any AutoLISP variable in the command line of AutoCAD. Now let's come back to the popular example that we have, construction of a circle, because we have seen earlier how to do it also in a macro. Now let's see how it can be executed as a visual Lisp command. So as you very well know, the circle command is executed by calling the function C or circle as a whole. So that will invoke the AutoCAD circle command, followed which it will ask for the center point of the circle. And once you have entered this or specified the center point on the screen or specified the coordinates, then next it will prompt for directly enter the radius, or you can override it by specifying the diameter using D symbol and then proceed on to give the numerical command to that, and then you come out of the command by clicking the enter button. So this is the sequence of the command that you execute in a circle command. So earlier in macro we have seen that we use underscore command to invoke the circle command, and followed with caret C to invoke the double cancel operation and then execute this macro. Let us see how it is done in the list. But this is to just to make you recall the steps that are involved in building a circle. So always whatever you are replicating, as we talked about very well in the earlier of the session, we spoke that we are replicating the steps that are doing in a normal way in a programmatic, in an algorithmic way. So that is what we are doing it here. So the first command is we want to set up a variable that we want to call. So here we are saying that we'll first assign set q the variable x as 1. Now when we click on the command as exclamatory x, we can see that the output is as 1. So now the command is what we have to call is a circle. So this is what we expect. The first is the specifying the center point and then specifying the radius of it. So now what we can do is we can call for that radius instead of typing it. What we have done is we have assigned value to the variable x. So when we are calling for that as an exclamatory x, now it will result in a radius of x for this point. Also, you can recollect that whatever is inside the angular bracket is the predefined command here. So this x is assigned as a radius to the circle that we have here. So this is how you can call for the input, a numerical input, by a pre-stored value using AutoLISP function. So now let us go and see how we can use AutoCAD commands by itself. So command function is used to access the AutoCAD command that is built within the system. So for example, when you use this total text command space double quotes circle space will invoke the AutoCAD command of circle. Likewise, command trim will invoke the AutoCAD command of trim function. So likewise, what we have to understand is in certain functions where it invokes a dialog box. So in AutoLISP, particularly in Visual Lisp environment that we are seeing here, there won't be any dialog box that will be displayed in here. So in order to force AutoLISP to showcase the dialog box to us, to force display of it, we have to use the function initDia before the command so that the dialog box will get forced. So this is one tidbit we like to introduce it here. So next, suppose if we want to pause for any user input, then that command is the pause command here. So in the circle command, we have to pause a step to get the input of here, because likewise in macro we had used the same similar pause command to get an user input. So likewise here it is directly a textual representation that if you type in the word pause, AutoCAD understands that it has to wait for an user command. And likewise, when you type in command within parentheses, AutoCAD understands that it has to come out of the previous command that is within it. So these are the basic AutoCAD commands that we are looking at. That is, first putting any variable name preceded by command understands that all the textual characters that are following has to be treated as AutoCAD commands and it has to look within its library to execute. So that is the function of command space double quotes and the AutoCAD command within. So likewise, when we are invoking any AutoCAD commands, if there's a dialog box involved within it, AutoLISP Visual Lisp does not display it, and hence in order to force those display of the command window, the dialog window, we have to use the initDia command. And during the execution of this commands, AutoLISP command that involve any user input that is required, then that can be called forward by using the string characters pause that will identify the interpreter that it has to wait for the user input. And finally, command within parentheses, this sequence of characters will make AutoLISP interpreter to understand that it has to cancel the previous operation that is it executing. So finally, the double quotes open and close without any space translates that AutoLISP has to give the enter command. Enter as in the our keyboard enter command, the new line command that we are doing, right? So that is translated using the double quotes open and close command that AutoLISP interprets. So this is the usage of AutoCAD commands within your AutoLISP environment. So let's look into some examples. So this command here, you can see that we have two arguments that are passed into this command. So the first argument itself is an AutoCAD command, that is, as it is preceded by the variable command. So AutoCAD understands that it has to execute an AutoCAD command. That is, it will now start looking into the next sequence of characters within the double quotes. So it understands that it has to perform its zoom operation. Next, followed by a space and followed by a, it will understand that it has to zoom to all. So this is the command that will execute here. So likewise, if you want to erase all this thing, then the command erase, once it's invoked, then the next sequence of command that we are giving is the character L, and in order to execute it, that is after selecting the objects, and then you have to press in enter to close this erase command. So that is why it is followed by the double quotes command. Likewise, for executing a circle with radius 1, you can see that command space circle within double quotes space pause. So now here, once this circle command is executed, now AutoLISP waits for the user to give the input of the center point. So it is pause for that input. Once the user input is obtained, then it will go for the next sequence of that. It is to specify the radius. So now the radius is specified as 1, and followed by it we have a double quotes indicating that we are coming out of this command. And finally, by just typing in simple command without any arguments, it will cancel whatever existing command it is within. So these are some examples involving AutoCAD commands. So now we look into the most interesting part here, how to create our own custom commands. So it means that we are no longer calling any AutoCAD command, but rather we are typing it out, our own requirements, and then feeding it into the AutoCAD library, and using these AutoCAD functions, we are able to make our own application or requirement. So this is how it will be done. So we define the custom command by using the function name defun. So this binds a set of expressions to a variable and it executes it. For example, defun C:\test. So now here test is the custom command that you are executing. You can see that the parameters or variables to this command test is the innermost set of open and curly parentheses or close parentheses, whereas the defun function assigns this variable test here. So let us look into what are the different parts to it. So the command here is test as indicated, but the defun is the function that we are expressing, and C it's a AutoCAD command that is we are saying that whatever following that is the command that needs to be bind as a function. So the text is the custom command name followed which the arguments. So currently within the parameters, we have not given any arguments or variables that are passed within it. But based on the structure of this custom command, we can pass any number of arguments or variables that you want to do. So for example, let us see this command. So here we are calling in defun C:\test as a no input command. So that is once we call in the test function custom command, it will go into the sub commands that it have here. So once this function is called upon, it will execute these commands one by one. So now we can see that we are performing more than one action together. When this function is called upon, the first line what it executes is it will zoom to all of the extents, and next it will draw a circle with the user input of the center point, and then it will pass the argument as 1 for the radius and then come out of it, and then cancel out the whatever command it is within and then exit. So this is the system, this the user command that we are executing here using this name called as test and assigning it as a user command using this function defun. So this is a simple overview of how you can create your own custom command. Likewise, one more example is, it's a very popular one that we can use. So if you could recollect, in the circle command itself, we have the tangent radius command that do not bear any system variable. That is, you cannot call it directly. You have to go it in a sequence of way to specify explicitly using the GUI interface stating that it's going to be a tangent radius. Whereas we can use this custom command using this AutoLISP environment to create your own variable called as a TTR that is going to be a function. So you can define this And when executed this TTR, it means that it will automatically goes into that. See what happens is, this is the function name TTR that you're calling. But once you call it, the sequence of command that is happening is it will execute the command circle and then it types TTR as a string variable into its selection option. So if you remember, this TTR has to be selected here. It is no longer a system command. You cannot call it. So likewise, it is passing as a string variable. It is not passing as an argument or a numerical integer. So it's directly passing out here. And then we have three inputs. So one is the first object to which the circle should be a tangent, the second object, and finally the radius that has to be specified, that also is get as a user input. And finally it comes out. As a general practice, it's always good to put out cancel command within your sequence of code so that any leftover operation that is pending can be executed as a cancel and then come out. So these are some basic examples by which you can control the flow of the drafting that you want, and any custom codes, a sequence of codes that can be put in here. So we have seen what our codes all about and how to do it. So typically the codes can be written directly in the function line as we had seen it. But apart from that, they predominantly are written in a text-based editor. Example as a notepad or a notepad++. That's the first way of doing them. And the second way is using the visual lisp editor that is already available within the AutoCAD interface. And third is using of word processors, that is Microsoft Word or something, and then creating them. So those are the methodologies where we can write them. So as you can recollect, we said during the earlier of the session is that AutoCAD is not an integrated development environment. That is, Visual Lisp is not an integrated development environment. You have to have a textual editor on your own where you have to write in the code, and AutoLISP just interprets the code. So that's where the creation of the code first comes in, because only if it's a simple direct code, you can directly call from your command line in the AutoCAD interface. But all those multi-line commands, then you have to call it as a separate file only. So here you can save them either as a AXI text file or all with a .lsp Lisp extension. So also if you use the AutoCAD doc LSP, then it will make sure that this list function will get loaded in every drawing. Whereas if it's a normal AutoCAD.list, it can also be saved, that is only when AutoCAD fires. So based on the method of calling, you can make sure it's only used when AutoCAD is used, or to be called upon in all the drawings, or called upon only when it is required as a single function. So this is how you save those AutoLISP programs, indicate that AutoCAD that this is a list function. So how do we load them up? So the first example what we've seen is to call it directly on the command line. Second is to load the text file that is containing the code. And the third way of doing it is to load the function in the Visual Lisp editor. So we'll look into one by one now. So first in the command line, what we have to do is we have to type the list program that we want to call using the command line itself. Or we can copy or paste the code that we have onto the command line. So first off, let us see and call the command directly in the command line. So let us go ahead and then type the command for drawing a circle with a user input for the center point and then a radius of say 50 mm in diameter. So the command goes like this. First, always you have to open it up with the parenthesis. You have to be very clear on it that. Next, you're calling in a system command. So you precede that with a command column. Then with the open and close quotes, within that you call the system command that you want to do, that is the circle space. Please have a note on the space that we gave in between. So calling the space, then we have to pause for the user input for the center point. So let us give a pause command space. Once the pause has come, then now to the circle radius. So 50 is what we want. and then space, close it out, that is giving an enter key by using the double quotes, and then close it with enter. Now click on enter. Now you can see that now the circle command has been executed. You can see here the command is circle. Okay, so and it has been called for, and now as the input is of pause, now AutoCAD prompts for specification of the center point. So once you specify the center point, now the rest of the commands, the remaining radius and then entering has been executed using the Lisp routine. So thereby you can see that now the circle of 50 mm diameter has been drawn in it. So the other way of doing it is copy paste this command line. That is, if you have any other textual editor and then you want to move it over, copy and then paste it on the command line and click on enter. That will also execute this. So now the difference that you have to see is this method of calling the command from the command line is straightforward and simple for very basic commands that are of single lines. But suppose if we have functions that run through a lot of lines, then command line methodology won't be proper for us. So in that case, we have to go over to the next one, that is writing on a textual editor. So now let us look into that part. So now we have opened up a plain notepad, and now let's start writing the function. So for ease of understanding, let us do it this way. So what we're doing is, one moment, let me just increase. Let me just increase the font size so that it will be easy for us to read it out. So to start off with, our understanding is that always the Lisp routines should start off with a open and close parenthesis. So right now we'll try to emulate a zoom function as well as a circle draw function and assign that as a function name as test. This example that we had seen in the earlier slides, but let us construct it back one by one in this notepad editor. So let us first directly go into the command that we want to express. So as we've seen in the previous slide, so the initial command is for zooming, we have in double quotes and calling before as a command line because we are calling a system command, and then this is the command. So first we have to zoom to all the extents and then close it out. So this is the first command in our execution, and in the next command what we have to do here is we want to execute a circle with a user input for the center point and then a radius, let us assume it as 200, and then exit it using an enter. And if there are any transient command lines, then let us click in a command to execute that one. And also for ease of readability, we'll introduce a comment section here. So this line zooms to all. This line plots a circle with user specified center and a radius of 200. Okay, so this is the comment lines that we have exhibited here. So that is followed by a double quotes for safety, double semicolon. Okay, so now this is the body of the command that you want to execute. But we have to assign a user comment for, because even though they are AutoCAD commands, we cannot call it directly because we have to define it under a function and then call it. So for function definition, we declare it as defun C colon, that is after the C colon is what is your function name. So let us say our function name is test, and for this function name, what are the inputs parameters to it? But right now we are not receiving any inputs, so we just keep it as it is. So now always we have to see here is all the double quotes open should have a double quote close, and all the parentheses open should have a parenthesis close, and with that order of precedence is how it get executes. So this is our initial basic Lisp code that we have written. So now let us go ahead and then save it as